Who is the most underrated player, perhaps in NBA history? Or just maybe even more simple of a question, which is just that first part. Who is the most underrated player out there? At least one of them. That people just don't give enough credit. And that nobody thinks of. With me being 23, I grew up with Shawn Bradley as one of the many players that were pretty well. Actually, I came into the league around the time I was born. Actually, all you ever really hear and see, especially on the internet and even commentators sometimes, and old, retired players sometimes commentate about, is how Shawn Bradley supposedly sucked. He was horrible. He was useless. He was disappointing. He wasn't really productive in any of the right areas. And I knew, just from all of that hate, that it probably wasn't quite right, and that he probably did, and he seemed to do a heck of a lot more than people give him credit for. And so, with that in mind, I decided, why not make a video giving him credit where credit's due? Because the guy actually did end up giving teams extreme value. In fact, it wasn't just his size, his defensive ability to block shots and be a rim protector was incredible, and just simply intimidating even the best shooters like Michael Jordan into shooting overpowered or underpowered air balls. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. Hello everybody, Danny Maccam here, and welcome to another video on this channel. And this is one I have been tempted to do for quite a while. And I figured it was about time to do it, but I had to do a little bit of research behind it, because I wanted to make sure I got the best kind of highlights I could, and the best kind of clips I could get, and things like that, and made sure I basically got all the information I felt I really needed. Shawn Bradley was drafted in the '93 NBA draft by the Philadelphia 76ers after Chris Webber with the second pick. A lot of people, he was actually considered a super controversial pick because of the fact he had spent 2 years actually out of college, and he only spent a single year in college at Brigham Young University. The reason why he spent 2 years after his only college year out of the draft and out of college basketball, not basketball completely, was because of the fact that he's a devout Mormon, and he went on a missionary mission to Canberra, Australia for those 2 years. But then he came back, so in 1993 he decided he'd declare for the NBA draft. And people still figured that at least with 7'6" and his great potential, he could become one of the greatest to play. And with the era that he played in, came him playing some great games, and specifically he played some major roles for the Sixers and the Nets against the Washington Bullets and Jorge Merson, who was 7'7", so he actually had an inch in height on him, and was considered one of the better big men in the league at the time. Shawn Bradley had career averages of 8 points, 2.5 blocks, 0.6 steals, 0.7 assists, and 6.3 rebounds on 71.5% free throw percentage, 45.7% field goal percentage, and 23.5 minutes per game, with 832 games played. And his career playoff averages was 13 minutes on 47.8% shooting, 74% from the free throw line, along with 3 points per game, 3.5 boards, 0.2 assists, and 0.2 steals, along with 1.1 blocks. And all of the seasons were for Dallas, with Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki. So his career averages in college was 14.8 points, 7.7 boards, 1.2 assists, 51.8% field goal percentage, 69% from the free throw line, and 28.9 minutes. In his high school career for Emory High in Castledale, Utah, he actually was extremely mind-blowingly impressive, especially for his 7'6" big man. He had 20.3 points per game, 11.5 boards, and 5.5 blocks per game averages over the 3 years he was at Emory High School. And Emory won 2 state championships and went 68-4 in their record in the 3 years he played there, from 1987 to 1990. And in his senior year at Emory High School, he averaged 25 points, 17 rebounds, and 9 blocks per game. And of course, he was named a McDonald's All-American. And in his McDonald's All-American game, he was named the Western MVP, where he got 12 points, 10 boards, and 6 blocks in the game. So it wasn't so much the fact that he was just a mind-blowingly like prodigy type prospect coming into the NBA draft or even into college, but it was so much that he had extreme athleticism for a 7'6" big man. He ran the floor really well, and so his athleticism made him a highly touted prospect, and plus his potential was seen as through the roof. Pretty much there was no barrier existing. And though he never quite fulfilled that, he had some mind-blowing games, and his career averages show that he actually was used mainly for defense and as a intimidation presence with his sheer size, and his speed was also good. His reaction time was actually pretty damn good for a big man of that size as well. In terms of his career accolades, he was on the all-rookie second team for the Philadelphia 76ers in the 93-94 season. He led the NBA in blocks per game in the 96-97 season with Dallas Mavericks, his first season with them. And then he led the NBA in total blocks per game in the 2000-2001 season. He was born in Germany, which I'm not entirely sure if most people knew that, because most people know him for pretty much his entire life he's been here in the US, mainly in Utah. But he was actually born in a small town of about currently 9,000 people called Landstuhl. Shawn's best 3 games of his entire career was the Sixers versus the Clippers in November of his second season in the league, which was the 94-95 season, and he had 28 points, 22 rebounds, and 9 blocks for the Sixers versus the Clippers in that game. March of the 1995-1996 season versus Jorge Merson, the 7'7" tower, and the Washington Bullets, he had 19 points, 17 rebounds, and 11 blocks for the New Jersey Nets. And then his third best game of his career was in the 97-98 season for the Dallas Mavericks, where he came off the bench. He came off the bench and got 22 points, 22 rebounds, and 13 blocks versus my Portland Trail Blazers for the Mavericks. Off the bench, 22, 22, and 13. I mean, that's absolutely ballistic for especially somebody coming off the bench. And that's obviously was in about 20, I can't remember how many it was, I think they said it was 25 minutes in the game off the bench. He had 22, 22, 13. And just in general, nobody in league history apparently has gotten a 20-20 and 10 game off the bench still to this day in NBA history, except for the man himself, Shawn Bradley, that we're talking about. He's the only one who's been able to do that. So I mean, talk about flashes of his potential. He could have been triple-double man, but with blocks. It's incredible. So coming into his whole career, it was really his size that was the whole intimidation factor, basically, and his size and presence, therefore, that it commanded attention, even from NBA offensive stars that knew how to get it done versus big men like that. Just because of the fact that he himself was specifically a defensive specialist, especially in the post. Therefore, you know, he really didn't back down from anything. In fact, the main reason why Shawn Bradley is known as the man who was postered by far the most in NBA history throughout his entire career, and now basically he is the most postered man in NBA history, it's not because of the fact he was bad at blocking dunks or bad at defense. He got plenty of blocks on even some of the best dunkers in his career, but it's because of the fact that he had an undying defensive mentality, which meant that no matter if he was risking getting himself absolutely obliterated on on the wrong end of a dunk, you know, a poster, he didn't care. He was still determined to make sure he did the best defensive effort he could for his team and try and prevent an easy dunk. If that meant an and one opportunity was created, so be it. He just wanted to make sure he knew what all the offenders know, that they're gonna have his 7'6" defensive specialist frame going at them like a bat out of hell, just like they're going at him with a bat out of hell trying to poster him. So that's why he's the most postered individual out there. So instead of using that as a way to try and argue that he sucked and he was horrible, you should look at that instead as a extremely rare gem. Even supremely good post defenders and block party specialists throughout NBA history, none of them have ever been, not even Bill Russell has been remotely as inclined as Shawn Bradley to risk getting posterized on a dunk. That's how undying his defensive presence was. So he refused to not contest every single shot that was near him, within his vicinity. He would make sure he contested every single shot that was taken near him. That's another reason why he was so incredibly sought after his entire career and played 12 seasons, is because of the fact his defensive presence and his defensive mentality. I mean, he never gave up on any defensive possessions. He was always there to affect it, if not block it. That's why he got postered. So instead of using that against him, use that as a case for him to say he was actually probably one of the best defensive post players in league history, just simply because of that mentality and presence, where he was undying. He did not care if he got posterized at all. It's one of the main things I need to feature on that. So, is his defensive ability, his block party presence in the paint, and then the fact that he could affect any and every offender's shot if he so was inclined, and he was, every single time. Which is also why then he got posted a lot. Number two is because of the fact that he was very athletic for his size. He was very quick. He could run the floor. In fact, he has a accolade and highlight of weaving through defense with simple crossovers and going coast to coast for a dunk off of a steal he had obtained. He had a certain fire in him that I don't think most players ever had. So that would be like a third reason why you would want him on your team, why you would be interested. Now, one of the main reasons why, going back to his days going into the draft, a little into college, he was really a controversial prospect, was because of the fact that he was so incredibly lanky. He didn't have really any muscles on him. He didn't really have any kind of bulk at all. Not fat, not muscle, not anything. He was just a 7'6" twig, is basically what he was. And in fact, throughout his entire career, he never really seemed to be able to gain too much weight or muscle on him. Like, even with the extreme regimens that the Sixers gave him from the day one, after he was drafted, And I think, if I remember correctly, the heaviest he got in the NBA was 245 pounds, and that's with the strength and conditioning and adding muscle. He was only really able to add around 10 pounds of muscle to his frame, so he was 7'6" and around 245 pounds. So he always stayed lanky, and that's another reason why a lot of teams even when he was in the NBA, were passive on him. They didn't like that idea. In some of the highlights for these games, you can tell that one of the main things he did was, again, he was undying on defense, so he contested every shot that was within his vicinity, even if he had to try and bend himself and flex himself around another player. He would contest another shot, and even if he wasn't really too close to a really elitist offender like Michael Jordan, there was still obviously a mental breakdown in that player, including Michael, where they would airball it too long or too short. And so that was one of the things I noticed that I thought was amazing. Was the fact that it really was just his simple 7'6" presence, and the fact that he knew how to block shots of any kind that intimidated even the best offensive players, like the likes of Michael Jordan, into air balls. It wasn't that close. It wasn't within shot block range. So he really is a very, very underrated player to this day. And there's a good reason why, therefore, the Mavericks were so happy to have him on their squad from 1995-1996 season, I believe, to 2004-2005 season. Yeah, and it's because he was that valuable. I mean, even in 13 minutes to do what he did, that's 13 minutes off the bench. I mean, he averaged 3 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1 block a game. That is great in 13 minutes off the bench in playoffs to do that. I don't care if you're 7'6" and therefore it's like, oh, it's his size. Yeah, technically that's a huge part of it in that case, but it's still that valuable. So, for a player that averaged what he did for his career and in 23.5 minutes a game and got the accolades he did, he really is one of the most underrated, in my personal opinion, players in NBA history for what he was able to do, even just by his sheer presence on the court. Yeah, I mean, he holds NBA records. He still holds a Mavericks record. He holds a single season record in blocks, in total blocks, for the NBA's 76ers. He still holds that. And that was from his, I believe, his second season with the Sixers, his second season in the league. I mean, I think he still holds some single game records for the Mavericks as well. So, I mean, he is very underrated. And he needs to have the credit where credit's due. Clearly, he was very good to have on your squad. He was extremely effective and helpful. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. I hope you guys got the gist out of it. And go ahead and leave a like if you enjoyed, obviously, because that lets me know you enjoyed, and it's very, very helpful. Go ahead and leave suggestions for another underrated player in NBA history, one of the most underrated, in your personal opinion. And maybe I'll make a video on that too. But yeah, otherwise I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and otherwise, goodbye everybody.